Thanks, Julie. I'm going to start. Hi, everybody. My name is Stephanie Margolin. Julie, do you want to throw our slides up? We're very spoiled because Julie's going to do the slides today. Great, thanks. And we have a bit.ly. We'll put this on at the end again if you want to access the slide deck. But you can show the next slide. Thanks. Okay, this is all of us presenting today. Myself, Stephanie Margolin, my colleagues Sherri, Farber, and Iris Finkel, and then our colleague Gina Levitan, who helped a lot with this presentation, but is teaching right now, and so she can't be part of the presentation itself. And you can flip it again. So here's what we're going to do. We gave you a little agenda. The big parts, I think, are the SciSpace, Research Rabbit, and Primo, but also talking about some lessons. So I can do the prologue now if you want to flip that again. Thanks. Okay, so I will start by big disclosure. I am 100% not a techie person, but I am a pedagogy person. And so today we're going to talk about these techie tools, but we're also going to think about the roles they might play in pedagogy around research. And so I have other notes. I did them in the wrong order, but anyway, so we're going to demonstrate some tools you might not have heard of, talk about how some of these tools and others like them might be useful in your classrooms. And we're really thinking strongly about encouraging critical thinking amongst your students. And then we're really hoping to have some discussion and field some questions, not necessarily answer them, but certainly hear what people are thinking about and wondering about. So we're trying to keep our presentation quick and efficient so that we have plenty of time to talk afterwards. So some of us in the library became interested in AI from the first ACERT presentation on ChatGPT, which was was that 18 months ago, 2 years ago? It was a while ago. One thing that we noticed in the library, probably shortly after that, was we have a chat service, and we started getting requests for help from faculty and students asking us for very specific articles that people couldn't find, and they couldn't find them because they didn't exist, and they had initially seen them on ChatGPT. So that was sort of our first hands-on introduction in the library, and we spent some time thinking about that and exploring that. And my other colleague, who's also on, Meg Bausman, and I even threw some work in that direction in our One Critic course, where we put a list of citations from ChatGPT and had students explore them and try and find them and try and figure out why they couldn't find them. Then if you flash forward a bit later, maybe 6 months later, I was consulting with a doctoral student in education, and that was the person who first introduced me to Research Rabbit, which we're going to see in a few minutes. And the promise of that tool was to take the sources you already found and then build a web based on citations and references. And so it sort of build this web, and it would help you to identify things you might be missing in a literature review. So when we first looked at it, a few of us got together and were like, we should know about these things in the library. And we looked at it, and it wasn't as functional as it could have been. But as all AI tools, a few months pass and we look at it again, and it's sort of more interesting. So finally, this small group of us thought we better sign up for an ACERT presentation because otherwise we will not move this forward. And at least now, if we sort of share what we're learning and what we're wondering about, it will sort of build a larger community. So we want to hear from you. We want to know how we can help you support these tools, and we want to show you what we had found. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Sherri, who's going to start showing us some tools.
Okay, so we can move to the next slide. Hi, my name is Sherri Farber, and I am also a librarian here. Just some disclaimers or some background. My interest is in information literacy, also critical pedagogy. I'm coming at things from a critical analysis perspective. And so I'm really interested also in how students as well as the general public kind of interact with information. And as I go through some of these questions, I think are critical to how we assess these tools as tools. So I think to get started, if we can advance one more slide before I show you SciSpace, I would like you, we picked these tools. We could have picked a whole bunch of tools. There's lots of tools. So we're going to show you these specific ones, especially before we get to what I was going to show you, as examples of what's out there and also of approaches to how you can approach all different tools. And the two that I'm going to show you are very different. So that was one of the things. But I want you to consider in any tool you approach, what I have found from playing around with them. I'm not an expert. That's another disclaimer. I played around with these tools, which is the best way to learn anything. And some of the critical considerations that I think you should keep in mind are, what are the sources being indexed? Because this is they all of these tools make a lot of claims, and you cannot rely on their claims. You really have to kind of check how comprehensive the indexing is, and that level of comprehensiveness also depends on what the need is. For undergraduates, there's going to be a different kind of bar than graduate students. I don't recommend using any of these tools for a literature review for graduate students. They will not reach that level of comprehensiveness. But also attached to that question of comprehensiveness is how are their algorithms biasing those results? And you could see them you can make some assumptions only by comparing them to other databases or other search engines, and you see it very clearly. They are imperfect. So that's the kind of overall thing everyone should keep in mind when they approach. So if we go back, actually, I'm going to start sharing my screen because we're going to pull up. We'll start with SciSpace. Okay, so this is SciSpace, and this is the home page. And just to give you some background, some basic information, their stated purpose is to help researchers better understand academic papers by simplifying complex texts. Now, that should be as a librarian, that's a red flag in itself that they make that statement, because there's a reason why texts are complex. So I think, especially for undergrads, that's like super enticing. And they claim you can decode texts. Uploaded articles can be analyzed. It can produce a literature review by, excuse me, by inputting a natural language question. And I'll show you a test of this. Cost, you can test it out. I only use the basic free account, but it has some serious limitations. Its discipline strengths are really in science and medicine, and excuse me. And then let's see if there's anything. Oh, and before I do a demonstration of it. And where does the data come from? This is their claim. SciSpace utilizes databases like PubMed, PubMed Central, and they claim some other things, but that is, I think, the bulk of their indexing. So when you their whole kind of packaging about this natural language searching, it says these sample questions I think are problematic in themselves. And again, I'm thinking of undergraduates. So when I go into a classroom and I talk to undergraduates who have an assignment and they have to pick a topic, and the most common challenge that they're immediately faced with is of asking questions, of asking a question that is going to be researchable. Right away, I tested out like this first one: how does climate change impact biodiversity? This is way too broad of a question, actually. And I just have these tabs open because I tested this out. So if you were, when you put that question in, what it does is it gives you, quote, the top 5 papers. Now, I have to admit, when you use any of these tools or any of the top, what reviewers say are helpful tools, the interfaces are really kind of sexy. Like they look nice and they like, wow, this is really cool. Like, look what this can do. And I'd say for about 10 minutes, I was impressed. And then as soon as you scratch the surface a little, the glossy kind of sparkliness of it um, wears off a bit. But I'll show you what it shows you. Um, First of all, I question the top five, this issue of the top to begin with. And then when you scroll down, it gives you actually top 10 papers. And right away, I could see that number one, they looked a little dated to me. They're and that, depending on the topic, that might be okay. I had here already checked top tier papers, but what I wanted to do is and I'm sorting by citation count. So I did those filters already, but I wanted to compare it just for ease. I could go to a library database, but just for ease, I wanted to compare it to Google Scholar because I wanted to very quickly see the citation counts. So this is a more specific one. Yeah, so what I saw in the papers themselves was that we in the scientific research, you have to get more specific. You can't ask even in Google for you cannot ask a general question like that. You have to ask what kind of biodiversity, right? And as soon as you start looking at a more appropriate research question, you get better papers, right? So you get this cited by 728, the role of ecosystem coastal. So you get better papers with better questions. Now, you might get better papers with better questions here, but even even when I tested the same question, I got better answers on Google Scholar, which is disappointing only because Google Scholar is super generalized too. So um, some of the features that might be of benefit to people that I liked were you can choose these different kind of filters of what it can give you out of a paper. So one thing I liked was the limitations, especially in scientific studies. So if I press limitations, it creates a column and um, it goes through the paper and it gives you these limitations. Now that could be really helpful, especially if you input maybe your own list of papers. Um, so things like that, I don't know how accurate it's going to discern the data set. So I guess the basic line with this is you have to, depending on the topic, depending on like you feel secure with the set of papers it's giving you as far as their being the top. That's such a squishy kind of term. It looks really nice. I think it's of limited value. So you can determine that yourself. So because of time, I'm going to now move on to Research Rabbit, which I like completely different reasons. Research Rabbit has a few differences. Number one, I don't know if they are structured like a nonprofit, but they are nonprofit. They don't ask for money. They were set up by academics. Pros and cons to that. I don't know how often it's updated, but the level you get is the full level of the app itself, which I kind of like. And I think I'm already logged in. So the interface can be a little confusing at first because you're thrown into this kind of confusing screen. Basically, you have to load in some sort of collection first. Now, a collection could be one paper. It can import from Zotero, which I did I tested that out. That worked for me fine. And once you have papers, this is what I like because I think it has classroom um, uh, or classroom activity kind of potential. So you can take a paper. I stuck with the example, the climate change one from the others. And here's my paper. And Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to go to the paper. Sorry. I falsely clicked. Let me go back. Okay. So from the paper, I can, I selected this. Here we go. I can, let's say I pick the references. This is what this is all about. It's it's designed for you to see the connections, the kind of community of scholars and of writing done on the topic of the paper. I find this super cool. I know that there are other apps that can do this as well, but I see this as being real more tool-like. It's not over-promising. It's not saying it's going to, give you all your it's not going to synthesize all the information for you and spit out this wonderful kind of transcript. It's giving you something that it's fulfilling a much more specific need and a purpose. So let's say you're starting to look into a research idea. You want to see what that kind of community looks like. You can start to see how the connections are made and who's citing who. And I personally find that really useful. But it's at that not totally beginning part of doing research. It's like a little bit, you've done some research, you have a small body of work and you want to maybe expand it, that kind of thing. So it also will give you, like, you could see a timeline as opposed to the network. And so this is what it's for. It's much more, limited, and but in a way I like that because again, it's not over-promising and it's not selling me anything that I think it can't really do. Um, let's see. Let's see. So I guess the green dots are showing what's in my collection and the blue dots are recommendations. It's always free. Yeah, and so I think it's using Semantic Scholar for its recommendations. So again, you can't rely on it as a comprehensive index like any of these. It's using Semantic Scholar. I believe most of the things are open access. So again, a very limited purpose to this.
I am going to be talking about Primo Research Assistant. So most of you already know, if you're using our library's resources, you know about OneSearch, right? So Primo is basically is Ex Libris's name for OneSearch. And we now have established OneSearch, as have many libraries. So there is going to be a tool, actually it's in beta right now, that will connect to OneSearch, and I'll give you a demo of that, and it will use natural language to initiate a search, which is new because when in OneSearch you had to use quotes, you had to use Boolean operators, single terms. This will enable you to use natural language, and you will get results that will include links to 5 articles and with a synthesis and insight in-text citations. So that could be really good for teaching, but we don't want to think that we don't want our students to rely on that for their literature review, because that would be bad. So we want to teach them. So I think that these tools, as Sherri was showing, some of them could be great teaching tools. And I think that's the best way to look at these, and not as this is the way you can find results and work and your paper will be written. So I am now going to give you a demo of that. So I will share my screen. Before I get to the demo, let's share this. I just want to show you, this is the new school, and the new school is already using this tool. So I just wanted to show you how it will appear ultimately when we are using it, if we are using it. And I think that that's a discussion that will have to happen among the librarians and getting feedback from you all. So this is the new school. This is a OneSearch tool, Primo. And so if we look for a search term, as we would in OneSearch, you will then, if this is already turned on, you would see this Research Assistant. You would click on Research Assistant and then you have to log in. So that would be the same in our case then. You would be logging in. Now you can see our beta version of Research Assistant because it's not implemented in our OneSearch yet. So I had to log in, and here you have to log in with your CUNY First credentials, which is different than logging in to see articles remotely with your net ID and password. So it's not clear yet. I haven't figured out if you then have to log in again with your net ID and password to actually get to the articles. But here we can put a full question in. So I'm going to put something to what extent is climate change the cause natural disasters? So I can just put in a full question. And you see there were some example questions. Now it's generating, again, the 5 top most relevant sources, relevant according to Primo and how they interpret relevant. So now we can see, I'm just going to extend it. I hope that I can do this because I want you to see more. But I don't, my sharing, but I'll scroll down so you can see. But here are the 5 top results that supposedly answer my question, and here is the synthesis. So this would be a great way to show our students how to integrate sources into their paper as an example, to show them here are some results, and this is the way it's been integrated in this response here. And then we can go, now this is what I was talking about. Here I can just go and download it, but once this is live, it may require another login with your net ID and password to actually get to the article if you are remote. So that's a good way to look at the results here. And then if you want to maybe fine-tune your questions a little, or if your question's a little broader, you can then change it and see what happens when you try another question. So here is another, and you can keep going with this. So this can be helpful. It can also be a little confusing, but I think it's a matter of teaching how to use these tools. Then if you want to view more results, you can then view more results here. And that's when you get your OneSearch results, and you can set your limits as you do on the left. And then if you wanted to show students how this search happened, you can actually go into the search field and see the terms that were used to build this natural language question.
Okay, so now we have to bring all this to the classroom. And I have to say, when it shows you the real search, it made my head spin, because nobody would build a search like that. And I think if you just built a search like that from thin air, it wouldn't generate anything, but that is beside the point. So let's talk about the positive lessons rather than the weird negative lessons that people might get from these. But I think as a group, we did think that the pedagogy was really important. We did feel strongly, I think I'm speaking for everybody, that we feel strongly that it's important to lean into these tools, not pretend that they don't exist, but also to use the classroom as a space to think critically about the tools and also how to use them better. So we generated a few lessons of our own, not generated through AI. The first one is kind of basic, which is 2 goals. Number 1, reminding students that AI is a tool, right? And everyone's favorite topic, citations. So the first one is citing AI. So planning a lesson where students practice citing their use of AI. So it might even be a place where you invite them to use AI, but then practice writing the citations. And if you follow, we'll give you the slides, and this link takes you to a page from the library at Georgetown, and they have sort of how to cite AI, which is very helpful. I make a tiny caveat here, which is I know that some of my faculty colleagues are also using AI in parts of their syllabus or to write different things. So make sure that we are also citing our AI usage because it is important, right? It's a tool and we need to make sure that no one thinks that we had these thoughts ourselves. The next lesson I think is important below crafting AI prompts, because I think it's for sure that our students are going to need to use AI tools on their jobs and in their futures. It's not like they're going to go away right away. And I think just the way that we teach in the library and in library instruction that keywords matter, and what Sherri said earlier, like better questions generate better results, it's important to sort of practice writing good AI prompts, because everyone can write an AI prompt and like you write anything and you get results, but like how can we work on writing really good ones? So again, this link also from Georgetown talks about prompts. And I think you could do like a fun lesson on like, let's all try and solve this problem. Like, let's everybody generate an AI prompt around this problem and how can we make them better? Like what makes one prompt better than another prompt? The third lesson we talked about, which is very similar to what Sherri sort of did and talked about in her piece about what to consider with tools, is that piece about critical thinking and evaluating AI tools. And I would add to this that this is consideration for sort of any technology you're adding, and even consideration or a thought process that we try to remind students when they're choosing which database to use for a particular project, right? Like anytime that we're using a tool for anything, we need to think about what our goal is, what are we trying to accomplish, and then what tool will help us accomplish that. So inviting students to think about their purpose, and then, if you're trying to write about science, then you probably don't want to use, JSTOR or MLA as a database. And so if you're doing, I thought it was really funny what Sherri showed, like in the size, so what's called SciSite, that some of the questions that they listed as sample questions were not even scientific. And so I was like, why would this be in a scientific database? So that kind of critical thinking that students don't always engage with, especially when they find a new tool, is this the right tool for the job? And also those back-end questions that Sherri touched on also. Where does the tool get its data? And how are the people that made this tool going to use our data? When we're putting in our questions, what are they doing with that information? I feel like this lesson could be a solo task, a group task. If you follow the slides there, those come from, it's evaluating AI tools. It comes from Temple University's library, and they have like some assessment guidelines, and then they make a little report card form, and you could use something like that in class. You could modify it to make it more appropriate to your students or to your task at hand. And then finally, I think thinking about the AI summaries that are generated and also the networks that we saw in Research Rabbit, to have students explore those in a meaningful way instead of just using them. So I think Iris said this too, that like just showing students what a summary looks like. Here's the article, here's the summary, like with the citations integrated can be super useful, because sometimes it's just a really big mystery for students. But then I think also to have an article as a class or in small groups, generate a summary, and then read the article and say, okay, how could we make this summary better? What is this computer generated summary missing? How could we improve it? What's unclear? And then thinking about how did reading the summary help us understand the article, right? Like there's a reason why we have summaries. And so sort of going back and forth with that, and I think the network also, like in the library, we talk about the scholarly conversation, and that network really displays that for us in a very big way. So I feel like as a class, you could put in, an important article on the class topic, and then have the class explore that. And how do these really interact? And how do we see like thoughts developing or seeing where articles cite other articles? Like, I think that's good for students to see. So we tried to go fast. We didn't go quite as fast as we thought, but we really did want to have plenty of time to open the floor to discussion and hear what questions you have, what thoughts you have, what you think the library can do to support what you're trying to do, how you can call on us to help develop lessons or collaborate on some of these ideas. So I think we can turn off the recording, turn off the slides.